Hello, welcome to the Shaman and the Pastor. I'm the pastor. My name is Kent Philpott, and this is our shaman.
Hi, I'm Neri Caldwell.
And I'm in San Rafael, Marin County, and she's in.
Down in Santa Cruz, in the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Here we go. We're going to talk. The subject for the program is how do people become possessed?
Mm-hmm.
How do people become possessed? Neri, what has been your experience there?
Well, so I'm going to assume that there will be people looking at this who may not have heard our previous discussion and may not know what we mean by the term possession.
Okay.
So really briefly, what we've been talking about is the possibility that a person can actually host a spirit that is not theirs, basically. We call this possession in shamanic terms. This usually happens when the person is depleted in some way out, and I'll talk more about that. But the possessing spirit usually is a deceased human spirit that has not been able to transition out of this world into other realms. So why that happens? For some reason, what's coming up for me right now is the issue of fear. And I know that's going to sound a little strange, but when people talk about things like this, it's usually comes up with a shroud of kind of fearfulness around it. Like this is a really scary thing. And I do a lot of shamanic healing work. I work with a lot of spirits. I do work in what we call the middle world with spirits that are not necessarily evolved or friendly. And I always get the question, aren't you scared? And since the beginning of doing this work for me, I have never once been frightened of spirits. Now, in many long talks with Dr. Harner, who was the founder and developer of core shamanism, that's what I practice, he said that when people get into trouble, it's because of their own lack of power, spiritual power. And the people who have spiritual power are invulnerable. It's like a spiritual immune system. They're invulnerable to invasions by troublesome spirits. So the direct answer to your question, how do people get possessed, is, well, there are unquiet spirits in the middle world, and there are living spirits, living human beings, who get depleted and lose their power and are therefore vulnerable to this. And that's how that can happen. So how do you maintain your power? There are two components to spiritual power according to shamanism. One is a strong connection, strong relationship with an evolved, unconditionally loving, helping spirit from the upper or lower world. The other is having your full soul strong in your own body. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of the work called soul retrieval. That's
the word.
Soul retrieval.
Okay, yes.
That's become famous because a lot of books were written about it. It's only one of many different shamanic healing practices, but living in this world, let's face it, there's a lot of challenges. People get hurt, people get abused, people have accidents and experience violence, and all of these things are said to be fragmenting to our souls. That's a whole nother conversation. But without regular attention to tending and protecting and caring for and loving and expressing your own soul in the world, you can become very depleted that way. So that's one of the ways that we lose what we would call power. Okay. A shaman who's working regularly to help in the world, to do healing, to relieve pain and suffering, is usually fairly protected by unconditionally loving, evolved, helping spirits from bad things happening. And for some reason, I want to say, because maybe because you're a Christian and there's probably people of the Christian faith listening to this, is that when we talk about these beautiful, evolved, advanced helping spirits, we can sometimes help other people understand that by relating them to angelic beings. Now, I'm not an expert in angels. It's not been my work in the world, but a lot of the people that I work with who have a religious background, they can relate to that. At least they can relate to that, right? So it gives us a way to talk, right? But that's more like what I'm talking about, is that level of, of beauty and unconditional love that's available. So did I answer your question? Let me see. I think I did.
Well, Darren, let me ask this.
Yeah.
Do you command, or do you work to get this possessing spirit out, or do you try to make it a better spirit?
Oh, what a great question. Thank you. We try, the attempt is not to command and order around, because all we get then is more pain and suffering. We feel that in core shamanism, we feel it's our experience that the possessing spirit is also suffering. And that there is a way to heal it, but that we cannot do that healing here in the middle world. It's dead. It's a deceased person. So the only healing, there's only one way to heal it, and that is to conduct it to the upper or lower world, where in those places that are only available to us in non-ordinary reality, then the soul can evolve and begin to heal. But our job is just to get it there. So it's not about casting it, it's not about commanding it. But once that spirit understands that that is available to them, they usually go, oh, I didn't know I could go there. I much prefer that. You know, if you could go to heaven instead of like dwelling in this shabby body that you're in and fighting all the time with it, most will choose to move on.
Question now, do you ever talk directly to these spirits?
Yes, very much so.
And they're talking to you through that person?
Yes. So
Can you tell the difference?
Yes, you have to be able to tell the difference. And the system that I learned, there may be others. I'm not an expert in every cultural process of depossession, but this is a very common process. The one that I learned is you can see it in the eyes.
Yes.
When you're talking to the spirit and when you're talking to the living human, and you have to be able to see that.
So the difference. Now the difference. Allow me to, because it's I think it's appropriate here. The difference here is when you're dealing with someone who has come to you for some kind of healing, then you're not commanding them out, the possessing spirit, but you're trying to work things so it will be better for the individual and for the spirit. Now, for me, and of course Christians since the opening days of the ministry of Jesus, have been casting out of demons. It's been something that's followed down through the history of the Christianity. But we will encounter the demonic spirit, and yes, you're right, you can see them. They're talking to you, and you're dealing with them. But what we're doing in Christianity is we're commanding them to come out,
right?
To get out. We don't see any good or neutral spirits or spirits that need to evolve or anything, but our experiences from the biblical material and on through actual practice that these are demonic spirits. And so that anyway, that is a common kind of thing. Now, let me shift, a little shift. Um, how do people, in your experience, how do they have these spirits that are causing trouble? How does
Well,
that take place?
well, um, there's two things here. One is how they become vulnerable to possession, which I just talked about. But the other thing is, how does it show up
Okay,
um,
how does it show up? Yeah.
in life? And the main thing I would say is that people around them who know them well suddenly say things or say things like, all of a sudden, this person just doesn't seem like themselves. I can't even tell who they are anymore, and it happened really suddenly. Um, they will act completely differently from anything they've ever presented as before. Um, Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, addiction is a classic sign of this. A possessing spirit that used to be um, addicted to something when they were living will try, when they're possessing a living being, to satisfy that craving through the living being, but they can't because they're a spirit. So it doesn't work. So they keep the person craving. And it's an endless loop. So, I mean, that's not the only thing that can happen, but generally there's a quite a significant and obvious total change in personality.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
That's how you see it. Yeah. And
yeah.
I would agree pretty much the same thing has been my experience. Somehow a person recognizes that there's a demonic spirit present with them.
Mhm.
And it's our experience has been it usually doesn't take place until after a person becomes a Christian.
Oh, they
Then
don't notice it, and they don't notice it. You mean they don't
they
notice?
usually
Mhm.
they will well it's complicated.
Mm,
Some people, let's say, have been much involved in occult practices.
mhm,
Um, Even people who have been psychics, people who have been involved in any number of things, long experience, let's say, in I Ching or Tarot, a Ouija board, various processes by which they have come in contact with demonic spirits.
mhm,
And oftentimes, early on, these will appear to be helping spirits, interestingly enough,
mhm, mhm.
like your terms,
Yeah,
Mary,
yeah.
helping spirits. And they actually empower. In just
Mhm,
recent months, two people, neither one of them Christians, had they each had an animal spirit, a guide spirit, and then the other one had three additionals. Both of them had caused tremendous upset in these people's lives,
mhm, mhm,
but neither one of them wanted them out because they depended upon them. These
mhm,
spirits were like company to them, uh,
mhm.
and they wouldn't always be mean to them. And so I had conversations with these people, both of whom I'm still in contact with, and I pray for them. And uh, but they would have the helping, but they'd also cause a lot of trouble in their lives.
Yeah, yeah.
But people would come because of that, and
So Ken,
not in the name of Jesus.
yeah, I gotta say that's so interesting. And you and I are not that far apart in this particular area,
That's
because
true.
if somebody had brought that kind of situation to me, I would have immediately questioned the the quality of that spirit that's presenting itself as a helping spirit from our view. The way you know the difference is that that kind of spirit, that's where things are kind of conditional. It's like, I'll help you if, and they present them with things that empower the ego rather than the heart. rather than helping them grow in compassion, for instance. They do things that are like, wow, doesn't this feel good? Aren't you cool now? Okay. So that is typically, in our parlance, a middle world spirit because it's not advanced enough. It's not unconditionally loving. It wants something. It's a transactional spirit. So, my advice to that person would be a, have you vetted that spirit? And by vetting it, I mean, if you journey to the upper world, for instance, can you find it there? If you can't find it there, it's not a spirit that you want to work with. And there's plenty of shamanic peoples who have simply left those spirits alone and said, go away, I'm not working with you. Right.
Well,
Yeah. 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 So you can get caught up. You can really
this
get
is a
caught up.
complex. Now, I was going to say real quick, give a short summary on how most Christians, days past, biblically today, how it is that the demons are attracted into
Right.
how they become possessed.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it real quick. First of all, the occult practices.
Mm-hmm.
The occult practices, particularly mediums, psychics, necromancers, people contacting with dead, fortune telling, practices like the mediumships, the seances,
Mm-hmm.
Ouija board, myriad of occultic practices. Second one is the entering into altered states of consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
the trance state.
Mm-hmm.
And the new form of that is a lot of the deep meditations that are practiced, the
Mm-hmm.
mindlessness, or trying to seek mindfulness, to the emptying out, the blanking out. That way you're attracting, you're emptying yourself, you're opening up the door to demonic spirits. Sometimes traumatic events like the story I told you last week where the mother safety pinned the kid to
Right.
bed.
Yes.
Traumatic events. Sometimes people actually seek it out. People who go through initiation rites into Satanism or into Wiccan groups,
Yep.
they join a coven, and they will actually commit themselves to the spirit world, and they invite whatever spirits are there that are part of it when they get together in their circles.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a number of ways that this happens, that a person exposes himself, without their realizing what may take place.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, boom, they've got something in their life that is giving them things, giving them knowledge, giving them power, but exacting a heavy toll at the same time.
There's a transaction there going on.
Right. So
yeah. I understand that. Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a little quote from the Bible. Paul says, behind the idol is the demon. The idea in a pagan worship, giving offerings to idols that you might have in your home. Very popular these days, particularly in things like Santeria. But there's a number of religious practices where they'll have a little shrine set up in the home. Yeah. Just innocently, when you walk in the door, I have a neighbor right across the street. Same thing. Same thing, man. The little reservoir, little place for that. But so Paul says, when you're not making offerings to an idol, you're making an offering to demons. Mm-hmm. When you do that. So anyway, so that's pretty much what I wanted to go over. But another thing we're talking about possessed, the scripture actually doesn't use the term possessed. in English translations, that word will be used, but the word in the Greek is demonization.
Uh-huh.
It's a long word in the Greek, but demonization, when you put it into English understanding, the ways in which a person oftentimes did not understand what's happening to them, they have become demonized. I'm going to give you a little story to illustrate this. And we got plenty of time here. And I'm after this story, I'm going to shut up, Mary. I want you to go.
Yeah.
I had a young man come to me, mid-30s. He lived on Bridgeway in Sausalito.
Mm-hmm.
He lived across the street from Molly Stone's, a grocery store. And I never found out how this happened to him, but he had a spirit in him that would tell him to go at a particular time to Molly Stone's, a certain aisle, and then he would meet a woman and he could take her home with him for the night. And he'd been doing this for years. But he got the ladies, but he also had a lot of torment at the same time. Found out who I was, called me. This was just about 15 years ago in my office in Mill Valley at the Miller Avenue Church. And he wanted to be free. He knew what they were. He knew it was a demonic spirit. Mm-hmm. And so I started in, and all of a sudden he stops and he said, "They just told me if I leave, you're not going to get any more women." He got up, went out the door, literally ran down the aisle and went out the front door of the church. It's always that way. There's always the goodies.
Yeah.
That go along with it, but at the same time, a continual tormenting kind of process.
Yeah.
And that was the end of it. I've had psychics do the same thing to me, who made their living by it, but they were also incredibly tormented. Yeah. All at the same time.
Yeah. You know what comes up for me, Ken, is a lot of what you just said about how people become demonized. Would that be the word?
Yes, it would be.
And you mentioned occult practices and things like that. And I'm trying to view all that in shamanic terms, in shamanic vocabulary. And what I keep coming back to is a very, very basic principle about our worldview, the shamanic worldview. And that's a couple of things. One is that everything that's alive has a spirit. And also this concept of what the middle world actually is. The middle world is the only place where we have both non-ordinary reality and ordinary reality, consensual reality. So this is where all of us are working out our stuff right here in ordinary reality, middle world. So when you work in the occult, when you work with things like seances and all of these things, and I need to add, to be quite honest with you, there are many shamans in the world who work in the middle world, and they are not doing unconditionally loving, helping work. They're doing what we would call sorcery.
Called what?
What we would call sorcery.
Sorcery, yes. Okay, I understand the term.
Yeah, now this is when you use spiritual power in order to advance the agenda of your own ego.
Yes.
Here in the,
yes.
Right. Okay, so this does go on, and I think the kind of tragic mistake that maybe you from your Christian background and me from my core shamanic background could probably find common ground on is this kind of careless involvement without much education in middle world, non-ordinary reality, which is where all these things take place. And you can get in trouble There's no
Yes,
doubt about that. So
yes,
I have a feeling we could probably pretty much, with some minor details and differences, but we could pretty much agree on that.
yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, we do. I see that. I didn't realize it before. I
Hmm.
frankly have not really looked intently into shamanistic practices and concepts and so on until recently, um, when we did our book called The Soul Journey. How um, you know the shaman, Santeria, the Wiccan, and charisma
Hmm.
are connected. And by the way, there are branches of Christianity. Uh, some of the more wild stuff that I have had the opinion has crossed over the boundary from biblical Christianity into shamanistic theology
Interesting.
points of view,
Hmm.
and that's what I call in that book charisma. Uh,
Interesting. Mm.
but I'm aware also that shamanism is the fundamental basic world viewpoint for all of this. It is the ecstatic state of mind, the shamanistic, what we like to call the shamanistic state of mind, where you go into that space.
Yeah.
You go into that space a lot of times for the drumming,
Yeah.
sometimes from Cusco,
Yeah.
uh, different psychedelics, and all manner. And the shaman was always the person who
Mhm.
could very easily and quickly move into that state.
And that said, it's very, very important that a shaman has to be a master of both realities. Otherwise, they cannot be of any help to their tribe.
Yeah,
I mean, in the old days, the shaman was the one who had to shift consciousness to figure out, quite frankly, where's the caribou? Where's the herd? If I
yeah,
can't find it, my village will die.
yeah,
So there was really always this very important ability to shift from non-ordinary reality, boom, right back into ordinary reality. Now I'm
yeah,
a farmer. Now no problem. I'm right here. I can pay my bills, write my checks, and handle life. The problem comes with people, frankly, a little bit more New Agers who kind of love to hang out in this non-ordinary reality, this state of ecstasy, as you say,
yes.
and 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 don't have the discipline to come back, right? So they just that might be fun for them, but it's not helpful.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
Right?
The
Yeah.
commonality, um, the commonality is staggering, and also there we will not fall into the trap of wanting to be so friendly and embracing each other and welcoming that we align the two
Yeah. Yeah.
along a spectrum,
Yeah. No, you're right.
because there is a great difference, and we'll have a chance to talk about this coming up. But we've run out of time,
How did that
and
happen?
Born again, I found a new way to fly. Born again, I ain't never gonna die. I'm born again, my life's no longer a lie. I'm born again, thanks to Jesus Christ.